Welcome to our Start Something series. Today, we are excited to continue with the third event in this series, which features in-depth conversations with some of the most successful entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders in the Seattle innovation ecosystem. My name is Ashley Esteban, and I'm the director of CoMotion Labs. CoMotion Labs is a multi-industry incubator which facilitates programs to support startups in the life sciences, hardware, and technology domains. Two of our incubators are in Fluke Hall, and our technology incubator, also known as Startup Hall, is where we are today. Across all of these three incubators, we support startups from both inside and outside of the university, and we do this without taking any equity or IP. So if you're interested in learning more about CoMotion Labs, you can see one of the managers. Raise your hands. One, two. Or see us after the event. This evening, we're honored to be joined by Oren Etzioni, Professor Emeritus and founder of TrueMedia.org, and Catherine Long, investigative journalist for Business Insider. Catherine will join Oren for a conversation about the misinformation hazards in this election cycle, the responsibility of creators, and the power of AI in fueling innovation. I'd like to welcome them both to the front, which they already are. And so I will introduce Catherine, and then she'll go ahead and introduce Oren. Catherine Long is a correspondent on Business Insider's national desk. She previously covered Amazon, focusing on warehouses and logistics for Business Insider and the Seattle Times. This reporting earned her an award for explanatory journalism from the Society for Advancing Business Editing and Writing. She graduated from Brown University and Columbia Journalism School Stabile Center for Investigative Journalism. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much, and I'm so thrilled to be sitting next to Oren Etzioni. Applause, applause. Oren Etzioni is a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence. He's the founding chief executive officer at the Allen Institute for AI and professor emeritus at the University of Washington. He's worked on meta search, online comparison shopping, machine reading, and open information extraction. His most recent project is True Media, a nonprofit that uses AI to hunt out AI misuse in political deepfakes, which I'm so excited to be asking you a little bit more about later. But the first thing I wanted to ask you is, you were once incredibly optimistic about AI. You said you wanted to devote your life to answering the question, how do we build an intelligent machine? But in 2017, you wrote an op-ed for the New York Times urging guardrails on AI. What changed?
I think that, first of all, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Catherine. I almost feel like I should be interviewing you. Maybe we'll split. No, I think that we need to distinguish between two very important things. One is the intellectual enterprise of artificial intelligence, which is asking one of the most fundamental intellectual questions that we can ask. What is the origin of the universe is one, what is the secret of life, and what is the nature of intelligence? How do we build an intelligent machine? How do we understand the human mind? I've always been fascinated by these questions ever since I was in high school, and I continue to be. When we look at AI technology, which is what's emerged as we've engaged in that research, we have to be balanced. There's still some really great things. I'm still an AI optimist, and I'll just give one quick note about that. Think about self-driving cars, right? We've read recently how in the streets of San Francisco and Austin, and maybe soon in Seattle, you'll have self-driving cars. What isn't always emphasized is how many lives can be saved. 40,000 deaths each year on American highways alone. 1 million injuries. So the potential to save lives just using self-driving cars is enormous, and we haven't gotten to medicine and so on. So there's a tremendously positive potential, but you're absolutely right that over the years, I've also become aware of potential downsides, right? As a technologist, you don't always want to think about that, but there are issues around jobs, around privacy, around bias, and as I'm working on right now, around disinformation. So I think the thing that's changed, to go back to your original question, sorry for the long answer, what's changed is that the technology started working. And when you have working technology, when you have a power tool, whether it's a power drill or software or AI, it's a tool that can be used for good and it can be used for bad. So I like to say AI is a tool and the choice is ours, and it's now time for us as a society to make good choices.
Speaking of good choices, your most recent project, True Media, it's an AI-powered tool for identifying the likelihood that a piece of media is a deep fake. We've seen how widely deepfakes can travel. Elon Musk shared a deepfake the other month that I initially fell for. It used a manipulated version of Kamala Harris's voice to create a deceptive parody of a campaign ad. Earlier this year, a company used deepfake robocall of President Biden to urge New Hampshire voters not to vote in that state's primary. RFK Jr. has said he falls for AI-generated deepfakes all the time. We were just talking about how you've fallen for some deepfakes. Talk me through the impetus for True Media. How did you decide that this was an issue you were passionate about and something that you were uniquely qualified to address?
I was exposed to this in the summer of 2023. It was actually a small meeting of AI folks with President Biden and some of his key team members. A lot of us came in with moonshot projects, exciting AI projects we wanted to build. I am particularly fascinated with the use of AI in assistive technology. Imagine people who have a hard time seeing or hearing. AI, and particularly the modern multimodal LLMs, can really help in that case. I came out of that meeting with a very serious concern about how democracy intersects with social media and AI-generated content. And the basic concern is, as you said, we can no longer tell what's real and what's fake. Things spread so quickly on TikTok and Instagram and so on, and that combination can be very toxic, particularly in an election year. And I realized that this year, 2024, something like 2 billion people are going to the polls in Indonesia, India, Pakistan, EU, UK, Brazil, and of course, our upcoming election. A lot of these elections are very close. And I realized that it was a real issue. Could deepfakes sway people? Could deepfakes erode trust and prevent people from, or dissuade people from voting? And I thought, okay, let me figure out what tools are out there for people to use if they come across media to assess whether they're deepfakes. And I was shocked. There basically aren't any. If I show you a TikTok video or an image on X or an endorsement, Trump's claimed that Taylor Swift endorsed him and he shared that on Truth Social. How can you tell whether it's real or not? You can look at it, but that's very hard to tell, and we'll see examples of that. What tools can you use? And it turned out that there really weren't any. Sure, Microsoft, Amazon have these tools, the CIA has their tools, but all of us in this room, what exactly do we use? And the answer is there wasn't anything, and so several of us set out to change that, and now we have a simple website, truemedia.org. It's accessible on your phone. I've got a little thing here, actually. Kevin, who's one of our interns, brought these over. Thank you, Kevin. And you just go to truemedia.org. You can upload a URL, you can upload a media file, and you can get that assessment within a minute or so.
Talk me through how you went from that vision to the formation of the company. You founded it as a nonprofit, actually. What was that decision like?
The first thing you need to have, and I think this is very appropriate for CoMotion and for a series called Start Something, is you need to have, let me use the word chutzpah from Yiddish. You need to have the gumption, the willingness to start something facing total uncertainty, right? I don't know who's going to fund this. I don't know what the team is going to be. I don't know how well we can do. You need to be willing to face that and say, you know what, I'm going to go for it. Thankfully, I'm old enough that I've done this a few times with different colleagues and friends and students. And so I was like, oh yeah, I've got that chutzpah. I'm going to start something. Next step is very quickly getting funding. And there I was just very fortunate that Garrett Camp, the co-founder of Uber, was willing to support this effort. He saw how challenging this problem is, And he put his money down, and off we were, building the team, building the product, figuring out the technical questions, figuring out how to distribute it. This is all stuff that we figured out on the fly. One of my favorite phrases about startups is, it's an airplane that you're building while you're flying it, right? So I was willing to go on that, and thankfully we're here in time, right? We've been very deadline driven, right? Because we really only got started in January 2024. Our beta launched in April. We've just released this to the general public last week.
Should we take a little look at it? Is that
please?
Is that
please.
allowed?
I'm glad you asked. You know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I like to say that a demo is worth 1,000 pictures. So through the magic of AV, let me just walk over here. Right, this is our website, as looks like on the screen, and we just have here a few examples. These are some of the most notable ones. And we actually even have a quiz, and New York Times has a quiz. Most people have a hard time with the quiz. With these three, I'm going to start from this one, Swifties for Trump. How many people think this is fake? By a show of hands. Right. How many people are quite sure this is fake? Right. So she endorsed Vice President Harris because she was tired of these fakes claiming that she endorsed Trump's. That's an easy one. Trump and Harris together. How many people think this is fake versus real? Fake. How many people think this is real? Okay. How many are not sure? How many are absolutely sure that they know the answer? Okay. Catherine, you don't count. You looked at it. You clicked on this. That's the point. It's so hard to tell most of the time. And this is a picture of the Mexican president brandishing a menorah. It's a little bit lower quality, which is something we often see on social media. Again, fake or real? We know that she's Jewish. This is hard to see visually. How many people think this is fake? How many people think it's real? And how many are not sure? Okay. I'll just do one. Let me do this last one that people were not sure about. And for the other ones, you'll have to go to our website. I should mention, though, it's free. We're a nonprofit. It's not like I'm trying to get you to buy a used car here today. This is something we're doing as a public service. So here's more or less what you see. If you don't need to have an account. If you create an account, you get some additional benefits, like being able to upload files directly and so on. But very quickly, this is what you see. We say substantial evidence of manipulation. This is fake. We are not 100% sure. The technology is not good enough to give you 100% certainty. So we say be suspicious. We have evidence. We don't say fake. And again, there's additional information. If you go lower down, we get into some details. We also have human analysts verifying it. I won't go through all the details except to say that it's a useful tool that we are now distributing widely ahead of the election. In the week and even the 48 hours before the election is when we see some of the most glaring and potentially damaging fakes emerge. And we've seen these in elections throughout the globe.
Well, I was going to ask, I mean, you're so in tune with the types of deepfakes that are coming out. Are there any trends that we should be aware of? What should we be looking out for when we're on social media ourselves?
A couple of things. The first one is that it used to be that if you squinted, you enlarged a photo or something, you could tell. Just no longer the case. There's no six fingers, areas of blurriness. With all the quizzes, academic studies, people are no better than a coin toss at telling. So if you think you can tell, you've got to give that a rest. You need forensic tools, you need AI to help you tell on the stuff on social media. And I see this every day. Even though I'm steeped in this stuff, I'll look at something and I'm like, is this real? I'm not sure. I have to share one example. I saw former President Trump's speech after he was convicted in the hush money payments case in New York, and he came out and he gave this speech, and I saw a video clip that was shared on social media. I was like, this can't be real. This is meant to make him look like a fool, and it was real. I should say that truemedia.org is nonpartisan, but I'm not. But we see plenty of fakes that attempt to. Anyway, let me not go there. So you have to use the tool. You can't tell. That's one thing. The second thing is to watch out for something that causes you to have an emotional reaction. So you're outraged. This is terrible. I've got to send this to 100 friends. How can we stand for this? That was the case with Mark Ruffalo, the famous actor, who saw a photo of former President Trump with underage girls, supposedly on the Epstein plane. That was fake. That was not a real photo. He forwarded it on Twitter to 1 million people, which was very embarrassing for him when it came out that it was fake. So I encourage all of you, before you forward something, take a step back and say, am I sure this is bona fide? What's really the source? Sure, it was forwarded to me by my mom or my friend, and they're usually reliable, but could they have been duped? It's really important to just slow down for a minute and think critically about what you're seeing on social media.
So on the website that you just showed us, True Media is able to give us a substantial likelihood that something is fake. And you also employ human analysts to give a final stamp of approval. You're using some AI technologies to diagnose this as a possibility, but what are the limitations? What are the limitations of the technology that currently exists and technologies that you've developed to look into whether or not something is a deep fake?
I think the easiest way to answer that question without getting overly technical is to talk about our accuracy performance. And there have been a lot of claims in the industry made by people who don't have an academic background or are on benchmarks that are open and so they've been trained on. We measure our performance on data submitted by our users who come both from media organizations as well as the general public. And we find that we are consistently above 90% in our accuracy. So that's the good news. The bad news is 90% means you make plenty of errors. So by our own admission, we make plenty of errors. I still find it to be an extremely useful tool, the way that we find the weather forecast or search engines and various other things that aren't perfect. But it does mean that we cannot give an absolute definitive decision without additional analysis that goes beyond what the AI can do.
Zooming out for a second into a big picture question, companies like OpenAI have put the tools to create deepfakes in all of our hands. But I noticed that, unlike you, OpenAI has not launched a deepfake detector. It briefly had a tool that measured whether something was possibly AI generated, but it had to scrap it because it was not working very well. How much responsibility should the creators of AI tools bear for their misuse?
It's a complex question. So I definitely agree that, broadly speaking, the tech community and the major corporations need to take responsibility. I think it's an interesting question. Should it be the creators like OpenAI or Midjourney? Should it be the social media companies who've spread so much disinformation of many different kinds, not just fake news, but also just messages to teens, to young women, live streaming murders on Facebook, just, child pornography, really, really noxious stuff with the goal of making an extra buck. So I think that we need to expect them to step up in different ways. Some of them have better than others. A lot of them have as kind of an afterthought. So you mentioned the fake robocall. It was a fake speech of President Biden in the New Hampshire primary. It was robocall to voters in New Hampshire telling them not to vote. This is election interference, which is criminal. But 11 Labs, the organization that created it, or made the creation possible for just a few dollars, was not liable. They've tightened up their rules a little bit. They have a long way to go. I could talk about this at great length. I think the short answer is that we want these organizations to step up. We want to improve the rules. That process is a lengthy process because the incentives are not always there. Rules and regulations lag innovation. Regulations are often subject to regulatory capture, where corporations figure out how to shape them to their own means. So I don't think regulation is a panacea here. In the meantime, we have an election in 40-something days. My focus for the next 40 days, and for all of this last year, is on what we can do so that this election is orderly and is not tainted by deep fakes. And for this election, they're not going to step up. The regulations are not going to be in place. So detection technology, the use of common sense by the general public is what we have to work with.
Changing gears a little bit, you've been working with the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence Incubator for a bit. You've seen a lot of AI startups. What have you seen that excites you? What advice would you give to people who are interested in starting a company that is based around AI? What have you seen that you would advise people maybe not to do?
So much there. Let me try to give a short answer. We can delve into things. Again, I think the most important message I have for you on this topic is actually the name of this series, which I absolutely love. Start something. Can be a social club. When I was an undergrad, I started the Cognitive Sciences Society. We had great speakers for discussions about cognitive science, philosophy, AI, all that stuff. Start something. Start a business. I have a 14-year-old here. He's an entrepreneur of his own. He's created a barbering business. He's also reselling clippers. Again, no infomercial, but I'm just really proud of the fact that he decided, despite his parents' protestations, we're like, stay with school, focus on school. And we agreed on a compromise. He's doing school and doing this entrepreneurial stuff. Here's the two most important things when I say start something. Number one, we hear so much about what's not working today, whether it's climate, whether it's our political system. The entrepreneurial ecosystem continues to be incredibly vibrant, incredibly successful. One of the most wonderful things in this country broadly and in Seattle in particular. So you have, by just being here at the University in Seattle, and tremendous opportunities through meetups, AI tinkerers, different networks at the school, opportunity to hook into an ecosystem to start something. So don't give up on it. And people say, well, when should I start it? Maybe I should spend 5 years at Microsoft learning some craft, and then I'll start it. And my answer is as soon as possible. Once you've got 3 kids and a mortgage, once you're used to a certain lifestyle, it's a lot harder to do. You want to start it earlier rather than later. The second point I want to make is that why do it? Are we all going to be Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos? No. It is the most exciting adventure that I've ever engaged in professionally. Each startup I was involved, we came together as a team, we developed camaraderie, we learned so much. It's also a tremendous learning opportunity. It's not just about the outcome, it's about the process, the team, the feeling of it. And it's stressful, it's hard work. If you want to just chill, you know what? Do yourself a favor. Don't start a company, right? Just chill. But if you want to do something, if you want to take a shot at making a difference in the world, start something.
I think we wanted to leave some time for questions. I have one more question of my own. So while I'm asking and Oren's answering, it's time to let your own questions percolate a little bit. Okay, my last question is, do you think the pace of AI innovation is accelerating, decelerating, or staying the same?
That's a wonderful question. I think that the pace of AI innovation has been accelerating for some number of years and continues to do so. There's evidence for that. I always like to say that an ounce of data is worth a pound of my intuition. So that's my intuition, but the data is present in the publication rates and in the funding rates particularly of AI companies and so on. However, you have to distinguish between the, excuse me, if somebody could figure out how to solve allergies, I know you mentioned biotech, right? It's not my own, but that would be amazing. But I digress. The innovation is continuing very quickly and accelerating. People's perception are sometimes not in line with what's actually going on. So I think a lot of people were shocked by the success of AlphaGo, particularly people who view Go as the epitome of intelligence. I think people were shocked by ChatGPT, whereas those of us working in the field have been seeing this exponential unfold. I like to say that our overnight success with AlphaGo or with ChatGPT has been decades in the making, right? So we sometimes see, oh, there's this boom, and then, hey, nothing's happening. And then you start to see articles in the papers like, well, maybe AI is overrated. You know, it's been, 18 months since ChatGPT, and, we haven't yet, achieved artificial general intelligence or what have you. And my response to that is never mistake a clear view for a short distance. We have a clear view. We're making tremendous progress. We need to worry about the downsides and so on, but don't mistake that for, oh, it's just a step and a hop away. The problems are still hard, and hard problems create great opportunities, both for academics and for startups. I do want to say one last thing before I open up for questions, and this is a word from my sponsor. I do work with the AI2 incubator, which Catherine mentioned. And of course, there's CoMotion labs and so on. So there are organizations here in Seattle set up to support you when you're doing a startup. So I encourage you to engage with the managers here, with the folks at the AI2 incubator. There's so much opportunity, especially now as this disruptive technology is unfolding and making its way to the general public.
Questions? Questions? Oh my gosh, I saw you first. Okay.
Thank you. So the technology that you've created at True Media is very impressive, but it strikes me that the distribution and getting it more widely adopted is going to be a challenge. I saw that you came out with a Twitter bot. What other modes of distribution do you envision for your product?
Well, I'd like to tell you that you're wrong, and distribution is not a problem. Unfortunately, I can't do that because you're right. Our biggest problem is distribution, and we are working with partners. We've reached out to state election offices. We're working with major media organizations. We are in touch with social media networks. Nevertheless, distribution is our biggest problem. You hit the nail on the head. I did expect, and it's always a learning experience, I did expect the technology to be more viral because while we're funded, we don't have a marketing budget. It's not like we can buy Super Bowl ads to warn people about this. And for whatever reason, people are not necessarily sharing our tool, sharing the fakes that we've detected as much as I expected. And so I'm doing my best to get the word out. And I'm also doing my best to raise awareness just of the problem. So again, realistically, not enough people are going to use our tool in early November, but I have had the opportunity to speak to many audiences and just warn them, be prepared. And I think that's going to have some help. If you have any good ideas, come talk to me.
I'll come talk to you.
Thank you.
So recently it had come out that there were offensive posts made on a porn site by North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. And he had made the claim that these were AI-generated comments, and he had not made these comments. Do you have any thoughts on people possibly using the rise of deepfakes and AI to do unethical or illegal behavior and just say that it was AI-generated?
I do, but before I get into that, let me just, again, make a very pointed comment. Anybody who's not aware of the story, you should really look it up. This is a Trump-based backed candidate, and you just have to ask yourself, who are these candidates running here for the Republican Party? It's very, very scary stuff. There's a phenomenon, it's gotten a name because it's so common, it's called liar's dividend. And it's basically people saying, oh, this thing that you caught me in a hot mic moment, this thing that you found me in a picture or an audio or what have you, oh, that's fake. That didn't happen. Our technology is also useful to address that because I showed you the red thing. But when we find that it's likely to be correct and authentic, we put a green box and say likely to be real. Again, we cannot be 100% sure, but we can be very sure. We also have analysts looking at the results, and that's actually essential in this day and age. So the problem is real. It's called liar's dividend. We did actually look at that. That's not within our wheelhouse because we're looking at images and audio and video, but I can tell you as a private citizen, he is guilty as sin.
Before we go, do you have any thoughts on tools like this or experts in this area being used in the court of law to make sure evidence is actually true and not AI generated?
We've had outreach from quite a few legal organizations, and they've asked for help because often in evidence, you have a picture, you have a CCTV footage, and you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it wasn't tampered with. So I am laser focused on the election, but what happens in the legal arena is something we're planning to look at after early November.
Thank you so much.
Down here in the front.
So I think earlier in the talk you mentioned regulating generative AI a little bit, and I think there was a bill recently proposed in California, SB 107, something like that, to limit or curtail the use of generative AI. I'm curious, what are some actual ways you would go about doing that? And I think you also managed balancing regulation with innovation. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Very rich topic, and I won't be able to do it justice even with my longish answers. I encourage you, I wrote an op-ed piece a while ago called How to Regulate AI. I encourage you to look it up. I wrote a more extended version of that in a CACM paper if you're interested, but let me give you the cliff notes, as it were. I'm a great believer that regulating AI as a whole is very problematic. It's hard to do, it's hard to verify. You do run the risk of stifling innovation. I think that we need to regulate AI applications. So when you think about something like self-driving cars, obviously, oh, my AI ran you over, it's not my problem, right? That's not going to work. We need to make sure that the appropriate safeguards are in place there. Likewise with deepfakes, so a very important part of that bill. And by the way, Governor Newsom did sign 3 bills into law. They're going to be challenged by the courts, so it's still a complex process, but they've gone from consideration and some modification to actually being signed. 3 bills specifically dealing with political deepfakes. So here's a particular application, right? Speech in general, generative AI in general, very complicated. Restrictions on political deepfakes, particularly in the run-up to an election, the 90 days or 30 days before, are very sensible, right? You're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. We accept certain restrictions to avoid election interference and so on. So that's yet another example. My general principle would be identify the application, the scenario, the problem, and then have the appropriate regulatory agency, whether it's the FTC in one case or the National Highway Safety Administration, deal with the rules that strike that balance between safety and responsibility and innovation. One last thing I'll say, it's an unfortunate aspect of our system today that often this is happening at the state level, right? These things really should happen at the federal level, but we have gridlock, and so very little is happening at the federal level.
Over here.
Hi. So many of the AI detection systems are kind of infamous for false positives, and you referenced this a little bit when addressing your accuracy rate. Many of my professors at UW refuse to use things like Canvas and Turnitin for that very reason. For those unaware, the false positive paradox states that when the prevalence, the proportion of those who have a given condition is lower than the test's false positive rate, even tests that have a very low risk of calculating a false positive in an individual case will give more false positives than true positives overall. So how do you assess whether your product is socially beneficial when working in a space that so inherently suffers from the false positive paradox?
I'm not sure that I understood your statement of the false positive paradox. We don't have to debug it here. It sounds a bit flawed to me. Very happy to talk to you afterwards. Your question, though, is a very fair question. And that's basically, if you have a tool that makes mistakes, won't it cause more harm than good, particularly when the error rates are so high? I mean, very low error rates are present in everything, right? Even I'm very much pro-vaccine, but it is the case that some people die from vaccines, right? I mean, that's the reality. Many more lives are saved. The way I think about it is that you use it as a component in a more complicated system that ultimately involves common sense and media literacy. So if I see something, and we've labeled it yellow, we also have a yellow where we're uncertain, or red, I would be very, very careful before I shared it or believed it with anybody else. If it's green, right, we say this appears to be bona fide, I would still be interested, okay, what's the source and so on, and I would share it under advisement. I would say, look, the best tools, and we actually have state-of-the-art tools, and we've compared ourselves with commercial vendors, the best tools suggest that this is real. Be advised that the tool can make mistakes, but this is still very informative. Fundamentally, the notion that only perfect things are useful tools is silly. Think about it, right? All the tools that we use are somewhat flawed. You don't not get into a car despite the high accident rate because you might be killed in a car accident. You just have to obviously drive safely, wear a seatbelt, etc. So happy to talk to you about this in more detail afterwards. But the bottom line is that a 90% accurate test is very useful.
Green shirt in the back.
Oren, I was in your software entrepreneurship class a couple years ago, so it's very nice seeing you again. Kind of slightly piggybacking off of that. For the give or take 10% misverifications, have you seen a commonality of what causes those misverifications? And if not, what are the parameters that you are putting in place to try and reduce that number? It might be above my technological pay grade. And then moving forward, do you see the misverification percentage rising, decreasing based on people being better with making AI deepfakes?
A lot of the work that we're doing right now is to identify species, if you will, where we see these types of errors and trying to feverishly remove them as we get close to the election. So we very much look at that. Sometimes it occurs when there's low resolution, right? The image is fuzzy, it's just hard to tell. And sometimes there's no solution to that, but certainly if you're seeing a fuzzy image on social media and a fuzzy video or what have you, and a lot of background noise, sometimes there's an excuse. Oh yeah, this was taken from a phone and the room was dark and so on. Obviously you need to be more suspicious. Another source of errors for us is that we don't just look at things that are completely automatically synthesized by AI, complete deep fakes. We also look at things that were manipulated by AI, modified by AI in an important way. The problem when you think about modification is, for example, we'll see a video. It's from CNN. It's a bona fide video. But you know what? It's edited very aggressively. There's a lot of cuts. And when you have a lot of cuts, sometimes they, for lack of a better phrase, they trigger our models, right? Our models are tuned to be suspicious. And so what would be normal manual editing triggers the model to say, hey, wait a minute, there's a discontinuity here. I'm worried that this was modified by AI. So we do have these cases. Not all of them are circumventable. That's part of the problem. As far as looking to the future, which is a very important question, I am actually quite pessimistic. I don't know about the next few months. Things don't move that fast. But if you look forward 2 to 3 years, the problem is going to get much, much worse. The technology is moving fast. OpenAI is releasing Sora, right, which they've shown, not released. Other people are releasing things. ByteDance just released a video generator. The net situation is that it's going to be more and more difficult to tell. Detection is going to be harder, which is why we need to augment it with various other tools. There's provenance, watermarks, basically various ways to tell where something came from and whether it's counterfeit, digital signatures. The problem with all these tools is that they're also circumventable and that our browsers and our apps don't necessarily insist on knowing where something came from. So back to Catherine's question, we really need the social media companies to step up and help ensure that you know more about what's being shown to you on social media. Very hard problem.
So you envision a future where something like True Media is integrated with every social media company, so that when you see a video on social media, it has a True Media rating on it. Is that what you're saying?
It's certainly my hope that a combination of tools, including something like True Media, is available to everybody, built into their social app. There's a famous saying that hope is not a strategy. So that's my hope. I don't have a strategy to get there unless this gentleman says something very surprising.
I saw a question in the plaid blazer.
Thank you. Hello. So I want to ask, what is your vision for future education systems, like in 50 to 100 years? Because the misinformation, the deepfake, as you mentioned, can influence teenagers, children the most, and what technology or innovation is needed?
Wow. Very honestly, I am not smart enough or visionary enough to think 50 or 100 years. We're in an exponential, right? And as you know, when you extrapolate along an exponential, the uncertainty just explodes. The only person I know who dares talk about these things other than some doomerists is Yuval Noah Harari. And he's a very smart man and very articulate. I have to say, when I read his writings, I get very uncomfortable because I read them and it's like, oh, this makes so much sense. And then I'm like, it could go like that, but it could totally be different. We just don't know. So it's a slightly long-winded way of saying I cannot possibly answer your question that far into the future. In the near future, I see some very important trends that need to be adopted. The first one is media literacy, which involves tools, but also involves teaching. Everybody needs to become a lot more media literate, a lot more critical about what they see. There are also tools that help. So, for example, we've heard a lot about the evils of chatbots and LLMs, and those are true. Most people have not heard of the debunk bot. And that is a tool with infinite patience that's willing to engage with people who believe in conspiracy theories and offer them personalized information that tries to walk them off that ledge, tries to teach them that, hey, you know, the earth is not flat, the moon isn't made out of green cheese, and we did actually get to the moon, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a combination of education and tools. The one other thing I want to say is that when you talk about education, you also have to think about the following thing. Many of us are incredibly privileged to have gotten a really good education. There are so many people in rural countries, in developing countries, even in Seattle public schools, who don't have necessarily the same access, the same great teachers, the same small classrooms. So the ability of AI and AI tutors to drive down the cost of education, cost of high quality education, by increasing the automation is tremendous. So you can't just look at this question of what's going to happen with education with teenagers just from the prism of we're here today and things are good, and are they going to get worse? You also have to consider the situation where for billions of people, billions, things are terrible, and AI can help them get better.
I think we have time for one more question. I've seen you with your hand up right here. Yeah?
When I'm thinking about deepfakes, perhaps one may say that they are similar to unsubstantiated allegations which happen during every election. So the misinformation before the election time has been happening even before the deepfakes. Can one argue that maybe one solution is to help people focus more on the policy versus clickbait, for example, during election time, just more substantial information from the politicians? And what is the role of journalism in making it happen? Can journalism is journalism meeting the demand for in-depth understanding of political discourse, for example? Or can it be better?
I'm going to answer the first part of your question. Actually,
I'm happy to take the next part.
And I'll turn to Catherine to. She has actually so many interesting insights, so at least we'll hear one. On the first part, disinformation and unsubstantiated allegations have been here for a long time. We know that Russia and others carried influence operations during the last election. So it's a very fair question. What's different now? Should we be more alarmed? The answer is we should be more alarmed for two specific reasons. The first one is we're all visual animals. We all respond to what we see and to some extent what we hear. When we see something, it's so natural to believe it, whether it's a video or an image and so on. And that's something that's changed. Before, you could more or less believe what you saw. Now that's no longer the case. So that's one thing. The second thing is, it's always been the case that even what you see could be manipulated, right? A Hollywood special effects budget or a Russian operation. But now we have disinformation terrorism. A lone individual, like the one who created the fake Biden robocall for a few dollars, can spread disinformation that's effective in an unprecedented fashion. So in the past, we had a measure of deterrence relative to state organizations. Now it's much more of a free-for-all. Those are two new things. For journalism?
I want to divide your question into two parts. One is, how does journalism respond to misinformation? And the second part being, is journalism meeting the needs of the electorate? On the first part, I will say that I think the one major trend that we have seen in journalism in the past decade is the emergence of dedicated fact-checking columns. And I think that in the past year in particular, there's been a bit of a backlash to that. I think that, one point of view is that fact-checking columns, dedicated fact-checking sites, they imply a sort of congruence between people who are not necessarily producing falsehoods at the same rate. What that means is that by focusing solely on falsehoods, by focusing solely on misinformation, we get sucked into a binary wherein we are only looking at the false things that people say and not the true things. That's why I'm glad to hear that True Media also will give you a green light if something is likely to be true. On whether journalism is serving the electorate, that is such a large question. I wish I had a better answer for it. You know, I think that a very topical answer to that is, you know, there has been a lot of clamoring in the media for Vice President Harris's economic plans. She released an economic plan today. It was not on the front page of any media outlet, to my knowledge. I think that there is a disconnect between what people say they want to read and what they actually will read. And that is something that I think no media organization has addressed adequately. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I wish I had a better answer for that, unfortunately. Oren, before we let you go, I have one last question for you. This is a real zoom out question. You know, OpenAI right now is seeking an astronomical valuation. Are we in an AI bubble? What do you think? One word answer, yes or no?
Let me just say that when this is a one-word answer. It just has a preface. Hey, trust me. Come on. Let me just say that when OpenAI approached me to invest in the $150 billion valuation, I said no.
Oren Etzioni, thank you so much. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you so much for your answers.